Hello and welcome to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah, and if you are watching this video, chances are you or someone you know is about to go to college for the first time and you're a little bit unsure about what you want to bring with you. Now, there are a lot of checklists out there. I know several major companies in the US include Bed Bath & Beyond and Target, and they actually put together this giant list of things that you might need for your first year of college. That you might need, I guess I should say. However, when we take this back to school hype and these giant lists of what you need at face value, I think we risk overspending and in general just bringing way too much into our lives than what we actually need. But with this video, I hope to provide a more minimalist perspective about what is actually needed when you're going to college, what you can leave at home and don't need to worry about, and also just some general tips for how to have a more minimalist college experience. So as far as the backstory on this, I did go to college, so that's the experience I'm drawing from, but not only as a student in the residence hall or dorm, but also for 3 years, I actually worked as a resident advisor or RA, and I actually worked to help freshmen, about 60 per year, get acclimated to campus, support them, direct them to different resources, make sure they were having a positive transition, all of that. So I feel like because of that experience, in addition to my own experience, I have some more kind of expertise about what you might want to be bringing or not, etc. And obviously from a minimalist perspective. I remember when I was first going to college, I was looking at those giant checklists of things, and it's just really insane to me. Honestly, some of them go up to between 130 and 150 items, and that is a lot of stuff to buy, especially when I'm guessing a large percentage of that are things that you actually never really thought that you needed or wanted even. And so I want to debrief that a little bit. Now, before I get into the actual tips and items that I recommend or don't recommend, I need to emphasize that it is going to depend largely based upon where you're going, who you are, and what items that you use on a regular basis. It's going to depend on what's provided by your residence hall or dorm. So really keep that in mind as we go, because my own residence hall experience maybe is different than the place that you're going to. And so because of that, you would want to do something differently. I'm just giving tips based upon my own experience when I was at the University of Illinois several years ago. Now, to get started, I feel like there are 4 main categories of absolutely essential items, and this is again just from my own experience. You want to have some really good bedding. I know a lot of the colleges have extra long twins, so that was something I had to buy when it was time for college. But sleep is so important, and there is kind of the stereotype that college kids don't sleep very much, and I know that was true to me, at least later on in my college career. But you want to make sure that the sleep you do get is really high quality. So if you're gonna splurge in an area, I would recommend doing that in the bedding. If you have a shared shower situation, like many residence hall or dorms do, I would recommend bringing like a pair of flip-flops and a little shower caddy of sorts, just to make things easier and a bit more hygienic for yourself. That is something I would recommend just to keep yourself clean. I also recommend investing in items that will help keep you comfortable when you are walking back and forth around campus. Sometimes the weather is not ideal, and I don't know about you, but if I am really cold while walking across campus, that is kind of a miserable feeling. And so I would recommend, you know, if it's going to be chilly at your campus, like in the winter, to bring a lot of warm essentials, maybe even like lawn underwear and stuff. That's what I got into later. I missed out. I should have started doing that in college, honestly. As well as if it rains fairly regularly, thinking if you want any rain gear to keep with you, just because, again, you're outside walking to and from different buildings, and sometimes if it's a big campus, that can be a long walk. I think it's worth it to invest in items that will help keep you comfortable when these types of weather strike. And then finally, another category of items that I would highly recommend would be to think about the kind of tools that you need to help you work efficiently and study well. So for me, since I don't really like to work at a table or a desk, I actually invested in one of those like armrest, backrest pillows, the kind that you kind of put behind you and you can sit down. I would often be sitting on the floor with my back against that doing my work there, or I'd have it like I'd be sitting on my bed and put it against the wall. Like that was what worked best for me, so it was important that I invested in that, and it helped a lot during college. Now obviously I have a couch, so I don't need to do that. But decide what is best for you and then factor it in accordingly. It wouldn't make sense for me to buy a bunch of desktop essentials because I honestly don't work at a desk. So I also have 5 items that I do not recommend buying, again based upon my own experience. And I think if you try to not bring these, that can help simplify your space and live more from a minimalist perspective, and of course save money. So the first one being a printer. At my particular university, every single residence hall or dorm had a computer lab in the facility, as well as most campus buildings. So rather than deal with the stress of not knowing if my printer would be able to print or had enough ink, or just even keeping all of those items on hand and maybe using valuable desk space for those items, it just made it a lot easier. Starting sophomore year, I would just print things in the residence hall computer lab or in the buildings where I needed to, and 5 cents a page to me felt very reasonable. And so personally, if I was doing it all again, I would not bring a printer. My next one is cooking equipment. Now I do really love cooking, but the reality is you're not going to have very much space to work with in your dorm room. I feel like a mini fridge and microwave are common things, but besides those, I would avoid other appliances, partially because they might not be allowed by your university, but also just because, assuming you have a meal plan, you are probably not going to be doing very much cooking. And if you do, chances are the space is very limited, and that could make it a little bit more complicated and also a little bit messier. Now, what was actually really cool, again, this is just from my own experience, but all of the residence halls on our campus had cooking equipment you could check out, and there was a little kitchenette sort of thing in one of the lounges, and that made it really easy. If you actually wanted to cook something more elaborate, you could just borrow the equipment and not have to buy your own. I used that several times, but honestly I feel like you just mostly eat at the residence hall or you go out to different restaurants and you're not doing as much cooking on your own, besides maybe basic items like cereal or other snacks. Now I will say I've never been much of a decorations person, but I know that there's a lot of cutesy things that you can do in your dorm room to decorate it, and a lot of people go all out on that. I would recommend maybe holding off on doing too much with decorations until you get to your space. So when we're in these planning stages beforehand, we kind of think that we maybe have extra space than we do. When you actually get to your room and realize, if you're sharing with someone else, that you have literally half a room and it's pretty tiny, you may not have room for all of those decorations you bought. I feel like it'd be a shame to sacrifice some of that space just for a certain aesthetic. I would recommend, even if you do want to do decorations, keep them very minimal to start, and then you can always add more as the year goes on. Next up, excess storage. One thing that stood out to me when I was looking at these college checklists is that they had all different kinds of storage containers that they recommend. Now on one hand I get it, because you've got limited space anyway, so maybe you just want to maximize that space you have to fit other stuff of yours. Or I think maybe you could just kind of decide, well, are all of these things I'm bringing absolutely essential? The storage containers could be somewhat of a crutch in certain situations. Now again, it really depends on you and your lifestyle. I know for me there's temptation. If I've got a container, there's temptation that I'm going to fill it up. There's all different kinds of storage containers listed on this checklist, and I think before you would go out and buy any of them, it might be a good idea to think about if those items are actually needed. And finally, textbooks are an item I would encourage you to avoid buying unless absolutely necessary. Now, if a teacher requires a book and you need it to successfully complete the course, I think you should get the textbook. I'm not saying, yeah, just see what happens, don't buy it. But there are other ways besides buying a new textbook. You can actually look online for used versions. That's what I would often do. Several places on campus will rent the book for a fraction of the price, and then you just turn it in when you're done. I don't know if I can speak for others, but I really haven't gone back to most, if not any, of my textbooks from college. And then another hack that's less talked about and maybe works for you and your university and your major, but I actually managed to, I think for my last 2 years of college, check out most of my books from the library. And they had a ridiculous renewing policy, like I could renew it for like 9 months or something. And so I honestly never really bought books after the first half of my college experience, because I would just check them out from the library. And that was so ideal, because obviously you're not spending any money, but you can get rid of the item when you're done with it and someone else can get value out of it. So that's one of my favorite hacks. Check out your library system, and again, it kind of depends on the major. I was more of a liberal arts major with history and secondary education, so my books were more set up like that. Some of the technology, engineering, math majors, I know there would be different like codes you have to get, so you kind of have to buy the book new. So it might depend on your major. And to end this video, I have 4 additional tips to help you live more like a minimalist while you're preparing for your college transition and while you're in college. So the first of which would be to do your research. Now that I've given you some examples of items you might want to look for, go ahead and go to the residence hall or dorm website and see what's provided. You can see if there is a floor lounge or larger lounges in your space where you might be going to do work or do other things. Look for maybe that kitchenette. Look to see what's provided. I know our residence halls provided tons of stuff, not just the cooking equipment, but also vacuum. They had basic tools available for checkout. They had DVDs. You can save yourself a lot of money by not bothering to bring them yourself. My second tip would be to challenge yourself and kind of take advantage of the opportunity of living in such a small space. Now, for many, they feel very frustrated by the small size of their dorm room. But if you try to see it more as a positive and say, well, hey, I'm going to try learning how to live more simply in this small space and start building positive habits that will support me later on and help me not accumulate as much stuff and live more simply, I think that's a really great opportunity. And I think it was one that maybe I took for granted, because then when I got out of that space, I kind of went overboard on stuff, as you might have seen in some of my other videos. And so taking advantage of the fact you might have to live a little bit more minimally anyway, and unless you want stuff to take over your entire space, then I think that could be really helpful. And along with it, I think sometimes there's almost like this apocalyptic sense of things like, oh, we have to buy this all now because who knows what's going to happen when you're there. You can figure things out. If you are going to err on the side of either too much or too little, I'd say try to have too little, because you can always take care of something that is needed once you get there. If you realize you should have brought something, you can order it online or find it somewhere else. It's not like you'll never have a chance to buy things again just because you're away from college. So if you're not sure if something's going to be important or not, based on your own lifestyle, I would say skip it for now and see if you actually need it later on. My third best tip would be to share things. In general, being in college, I think one of the best parts about it is that you're able to meet a ton of different people and interact with more people than you normally would, all right there. I mean, you've got maybe between 40 and 60 people living on your floor, depending on the space, obviously. And that is a lot of opportunity to get to know people and make friends and connections. But also, if you don't have a certain item and you need to borrow it from someone else, like, you can do that too. That's totally fine. At the very least, if you're gonna have a roommate, I'd recommend communicating with them ahead of time to see what sort of items they are bringing, and then make sure you guys kind of avoid some duplicates that way. And then finally, my last tip and the best tip here is to know yourself and how you live. Think about how you're living currently at the moment, and then I would say try to keep your lifestyle very similar to that. Chances are, if you're not using a certain product in your life on a regular basis now, I don't think you'll need to bring it with you to college. Knowing yourself, you might have things that are very important to you that I didn't mention today that you really enjoy. Bring those. There might be things on these checklists you're like, I've never even thought of that. Maybe you don't need to bring that then. So I think just really knowing yourself and your lifestyle is the absolute most important thing. Yes, you're gonna be out of your parents' house, you're going to be more independent, you're going to have more of your own space, a small space, but you'll have more of your own space. But you as a person's not necessarily changing right away. Your habits necessarily aren't gonna be changing that much. And so really keeping in mind that, you know who you are now, bring the kinds of clothing that you want, bring the types of items that you use on a regular basis, and don't bring the ones you don't. It's pretty straightforward, but I feel like it could be overlooked. So there you guys go. Best of luck to anyone who is about to embark on a new journey to college or their university, or anyone else in life if you're moving on to another stage of life. Hopefully this video was helpful. I do make videos 3 times a week on minimalism and healthy living, and would love to have you as a subscriber if you're interested. Let me know below in the comments if there are any things that you feel like were essentials for you when you were in college, or if you've got other questions you'd like me to answer regarding this transition process. I'd love to help. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.